Bilo niambia kama kazi imenishinda niende nyumbani.
Ongea kwa nguvu.
Lapo ndio nikakasirika. Ndio nikafanya hivyo.
Ulifanya nini?
Nikakuwekea dawa.
Dawa gani?
Hizo unapeana kienyeji
dawa ya meno.
Rudisha vitu huko.
Ati bwana ulitaka kuniua. Sema tu kweli mimi nitakusamea.
Nilikuwa nimekasirika vile uniambia ati kazi imenishinda niende nyumbani.
Uliniongea kwa nguvu, uliniwekea sumu wapi na wapi?
Kwa chakula yenye kwa fridge. Kwa hiyo nini ya tange yenye kwa hapo nje.
Ongea kwa nguvu.
Mtungi ya maji yenye kwa hapo nje. Na kwa hiyo damosi ya mtoto.
Ni sawa.
Bunga, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to BAV. This is Bunge Audio Visual. So today's episode we're going to talk about when anger turns deadly, and this is about the nanny poison plot, as you can see in my my headlines, or rather my title. So the question of the day after watching the video is, how far can anger push someone, and should employers rethink on how they treat their workers? So the reason as to why I actually came up with this particular episode is to ensure that most employees, just to ensure that we actually check on the way we treat our employees, not only at home. I'm not only talking about the way the employer treated her nanny. I'm talking about all other employers out there. And this also happened to other corporates outside there, because you can find that somebody is just from graduating. He has done his undergraduate studies. He's still motivated, and he or she has some little job experience out there. But it reaches a point when he makes mistakes, or rather when he falls short on doing some of the tasks that he or she is supposed to carry out in the respective department is supposed to be in the various department that he or she is placed. The bosses actually decide to approach such a case with so much so much anger, or rather so much disdain, to the point that they look down upon their employees instead of actually correcting them in a very, very simple way, or rather just trying and showing them on how to resolve that kind of issue that they've just brought. They instead handled that manner by trying to flex how powerful, rather how big they are in that particular organization. And this takes us back to the story, or rather the video that we've just watched. So that was a shocking confession from a nanny who has left men in disbelief, and she admitted to poisoning her employer's food, drinking water, and even her children's tea flask. And some of the reasons that she gave, that she was angry after being told her performance was poor and that she would be sent back home. So I think the nanny went to her boss's place to work, and I'm pretty sure she had set quite a number of goals, so that at least by the time she would have completed some of the tasks, by the time she goes back home to her family, at least she knows that by then she would have brought something to her mom, maybe to her dad, or maybe to her sisters, or to other people in the family that she left back, so that at least they could see the kind of improvement that employment has brought to her life. But it's so unfortunate that in this particular case, that the nanny was complaining that the boss never talked to her in a very polite way, or rather in a way that could make her feel that she has made a mistake and that she was supposed to correct in that. Instead, she said that she was addressed in a way that ended up making her feel belittled, or that made her feel very, very angry about the way she's supposed to do the tasks at home. So this brings us back. To a bigger conversation on how we treat the people who work with us. Because yes, poisoning is a heinous crime, and there is no excuse for attempting to harm innocent people. That is attempted murder to me, and something that has to do with attempted murder. I think it must be. It must face the full wrath, or rather the full the full face of the law. So let's also ask ourselves, let us also be able to ask ourselves that what are some of the things that actually drive someone to such extremes that ifika point yenye msee anafikiria kupoison mwenzake. Then apart from that, could this be a case of rage, frustration, or even mental breakdown? Because so the mental health tumekuwa tukiongelea for quite since time immemorial, but I think it's something that most of the people usually overlook. And in such a case utapata maybe mtu kama huyo mbocha ako na shida alikuwa nazo nyumbani, but it reach a point alikuwa anajaribu kufanya vitu lakini hakuwa in a right state of mind, so she was not able to deliver as per the boss expectations. So the boss ended up ranting back at her without even necessarily knowing whatever the kind of problems that the nanny was going through, rather the house help. And another question is, do some employers unknowingly push their workers to the edge? Because it might reach a point, it usually reaches a point where employers delegate so much tasks to the employees to the point that the employees get overwhelmed. So unapata mtu amekuwa na kazi moja but anafaa kufanya kazi huko, anafaa kufanya kazi huko, anafaa kufanya kazi huko, ameitwa huko, anafaa kwenda wapi, unaona? Tasks zenye inafaa zihandoliwe na mtu within a very long duration of time, but since ni mtu within a very long duration of time, but since boss hataki kuelewa, is not an understanding boss, he or she ends up actually frustrating the employee, that is the nanny or is somebody else outside there in the corporate world. And this is the thing that happens, and this is the reason as to why this is the thing that happens to most of the children out there, or rather most of the young men and women out there. Wamemaliza shule, they are at their entry level when it comes to getting into the workforce. Then inafika point wanaekewa so much pressure, they've reached a point they actually make a very very what do I call they get themselves involved in heinous crimes, like beating up their bosses, like killing their bosses, like doing so many things that I won't necessarily mention here. So you need to understand also one thing, that Kenyan homes heavily depend on house helps, and yet many are usually overworked and underpaid and talked down to like they're less than human. And this is the reason as to why most of the nannies end up fighting back with their bosses, because they feel so belittled. Hiyo madharau ambao wanaonyeshwa na their bosses, because their bosses are on salary na hao ndo determine kama mtu atapata 3k at the end of the month or 2k at the end of the month. Unapata msana anafanya kazi mob, but at the end of the month he or she has nothing to show. So we also need to understand that we also need to ask ourselves, should we start rethinking on how we handle work conflicts and other the relationship employment issues despite the financial differences? Because you as an employer, we do understand that you have the power, or rather you are the one who is in charge of that house. You are the one who actually pays the nanny, or rather the house help. But does that empower you, or rather does that give you leeway to look down upon your employees, or rather your nannies? No. So you also need to ask ourselves, does this case expose the dark side of the domestic work in Kenya? Because kumekuwa na story mob sana za nannies kuwa mistreated up and there, and these are the things that actually happen in Saudi Arabia, abroad. Mwana vitu happen in the Middle East. See, some house helps, or rather some nannies, end up even getting butchered because they were trying to express themselves, but since their bosses have their bosses' minds are filled with ego, it reaches a point wana feel that whatever you're trying to do, whatever you're trying to say is that saying kama hataki kusikia kitu tunafanya. So the only way I think we can be able to use to ensure that our message reaches home is to hit this guy, rather to inflict some sort of harm to the nanny. So the question of the day is, does this case expose the dark side of domestic work in Kenya, or was this just an individual with evil intentions? Unaona? Because nifika point ya kuwekea mtu sumu kwa food na ni employer wako, it means that there are two things. It's either you are evil, or number two, you've been pushed to the limit. And even if you've been pushed to the limit, we do understand that human beings are different. Our tolerance to pressure varies depending with the way we've been raised. We've been raised in different backgrounds. So I think on this issue ya interact, or rather conflict resolution between you and your boss, I think it's something that needs to be that needs so much attention from many employees and employers out there. And we also need to ask ourselves, does this expose the dark side of the domestic work in Kenya, or is this just an individual with evil intentions? So I don't know. Let's discuss. where do we draw the line between discipline and dehumanization? Because it reaches a point, it's there's a very, very thin line between discipline and dehumanization, and this keeps it balanced and emotional. This keeps it balanced, emotional, and thought-provoking, making it perfect for engagement. To many people out there who like to be able to share their insights or rather their opinions in such kind of cases, or rather in such kind of societal issues. So I don't know what's your take, guys. Kindly like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell as well. Let me get your insights on how we are supposed to treat our nannies out there, or on how bosses are supposed to treat their employees outside there. Thank you very much for that. Stay tuned for more updates. Adios, muchachos.